Hi everybody, I'm Andrew Locke. Welcome to another episode of Gaffer Gear. Today it's another gear review, and this time it's the Astera Titans. Now, given the complexity of these lights and their capabilities, I reckon this review is going to go for about an hour. So in the description down below is a time index, so you can skip to the parts you want to see. Alright, so before we go any further, I'd like to give a big thank you to the guys at Technical Art Solutions, who are the distributor of this product in Melbourne. So thank you for them for lending this kit to me and for lending it to me for as long as they have. And the reason it's taken so long for me to get this review up and do so much testing is because of the capability of these units. These units have a CCT range from 1750 Kelvin all the way up to 20,000 Kelvin, so I've had to do some additional metering for the reviews. On top of that, they are full color gamut, so you can dial in any color you can imagine. Now, the units are not RGBW or RGBWW. The units are red, green, blue, mint, and amber, so they don't have a white emitter. So I've been thorough with my testing to see if that made any difference with the units, and it doesn't. These things are incredibly high scoring with their color scores. Now, some of you are going to notice that this is the 8 kit and there's only 7 tubes in here. So one thing I better point out is when I got the kit, opened it up, unwrapped everything and fired it all up, one of the tubes wouldn't start, so we had a faulty tube. Okay, so I've mentioned they're expensive. Well, how expensive? Okay, well, individual tubes sell for about $850 US, and this kit here, which I suppose you'd call a Gaffer kit, this sells for about $8,000 US. So that's a lot of money for an 8 tube kit. So anyway, let's have a look at what we get. So in the box, you get this Titan power box. So this is like your charging station. So this enables you to charge all of the tubes simultaneously. Now, one of the big sales pitches with this box is that you can feed DMX into it, and it'll send DMX out over the power cables. Okay, so the power cables are quite literally these small little plugs. So your power and your DMX can get shared through that. All right, the next thing you get in the kit is 16 of these clamps, very elegant looking metal clamps. My criticism of these clamps is they do scratch the housings on the tubes. So that's something I'm not a huge fan of, but they are a very, very good clamp. You also get 16 spigots, so nothing amazing here, standard spigots. And you also get 8 of these elegant floor clamps or turtles. These are really quite nice, and they beautifully, elegantly mount to the bottom of the light. It literally looks like it is part of the unit. It's very slick, very sophisticated look. It doesn't look like something that the Gaffer pulled out of his truck. The next thing underneath this section is there's another 4 of those floor bases, but you also get these eyelets. You get 16 of them. So those eyelets mount into the end of the tubes. So you can mount one at either end of the tube. So at the end of the tube here, there's a thread, the same thread that these turtle bases go into. Now, one thing to point out with this thread here is it's not a standard 3/8 thread, so you can't, for example, mount a spigot directly into that end or mount a magic arm to it. But I don't think you'd really need to. This eyelet also mounts onto the clamps, so you can mount 2 eyelets to a clamp, so one at each end. So you could use wire or whatever to suspend the tubes. So that's very good. The next thing in the kit, underneath this cover here, is plugs, rubber plugs. So those rubber plugs are to go into the power outlets on the lights. So why would you want a rubber plug to go into your power outlet on the light? Well, quite simply, the lights are weather resistant. Okay, they've got an IP65 rating, so you can use these in a downpour. They're going to be fine, as long as you've got the plug in. Without that plug, they don't have the IP rating, so that is something that's worth pointing out there. And the last thing in the kit are these little pins, and the pins are to lock the clamp shut. Okay, so you put the pin through the clamp, and now the clamp can't unlock. Now I've got to say with this, these clamps, there is hardly any chance of these coming apart anyway. It's quite a well-built clamp. I can't see these accidentally releasing the tubes. We'll have a closer look at these in a sec. Look, I almost forgot to mention, everyone's seen the 4 tubes up there, but just in case you're wondering where the other 4 tubes are kept, they're kept under here. So you've got this beautiful divider that ensures that none of the tubes smack together in transport. All right, so let's go through what's not in here or criticisms I have of this kit. And the first thing that jumps out at me when I opened it up is you've got all these beautiful clamps, all these elegant bits and pieces, but there is nothing to mount a tube to a wall. Okay, there's no wall mounts. The next criticism I've got is to do with the Titan box. I've got a few criticisms. Okay, so one of the big sales pitches with this is it can charge tubes up to 45 feet away. So I think that's correct. 45, you can run 45 foot of power cable out to each tube. Now the unit powers off a Nutrix connector, which won't accidentally disconnect. You can power 10 tubes simultaneously, and the unit will very easily mount to a light stand with a spigot connection. So what's my criticism for this 8 tube kit? Where do you put 8 45 foot cables in this kit? There's nowhere to put them. So talking to other gaffers who have bought their own kits, they've looked into buying the cables and they've gone, well, if I buy the cables, I've got to put them in a separate box. And the cables, they're not overly expensive, but for the same price as that cable, I can buy a little transformer that'll charge the lights. I might as well buy little transformers and just run a stinger out, and that's pretty much what everybody's done. Because if you're going to have a separate box full of cables, well, you might as well have a separate box full of chargers. The next criticism I've got, and this is a big one, a lot of gaffers have bought this, taken it home, gone to play with it, and you can't run the tubes off your phone app. Because the misperception a lot of gaffers have is, surely this box must radio transmit out to the tubes. No, you can't. You need to buy the little link box here. Now, the other reason you'd want to buy this link box, even if you're not going to use the tube for fancy effects, is this does a fantastic job of updating the firmware on the tubes. Using your mobile phone internet connection, updates easy as the firmware on the tube, so that's a must. You've got to have that. I'm not criticising that this kit doesn't come with the Astera box, because it wouldn't make sense to have this sold in each one of these boxes, because you could have 50 of these kits on your film set, but you only need the one Astera box. With the Astera box, you can plug in 5-pin DMX and use Lumen Radio CRMX to transmit to the tubes. And the tube response to CRMX or to Lumen Radio is second to none. It's really sweet, it's really superb. Okay, the next thing is on this cutout here, there's all these inlets. Okay, so those inlets are for this thing here called the, what's this called? The plate? The wing plate. So this wing plate, you mount your clamps to. Now, you can mount your clamps in different directions. So, for example, you can have this going into a C-stand, because the spigot mounts onto the back, okay? And you could have 2 clamps, 2 lights going off this in 2 different directions, and you could make a triangle. So if you had 3 of these clamps, you could make a triangle configuration, for example. Or you could have this at the end of your tubes and have tubes going in different directions on your set. So that's pretty cool. But I do have some criticisms of this plate. Okay, my number 1 criticism is these screws are not captured. So they're going to get lost on the first rental. Guarantee they're going to get lost on the first rental. And here's my second criticism. The eyelets don't mount onto this plate. So that would have been really handy. I think that's a bit of an oversight. It would have been handy to be able to hang this above a set and have tubes coming off it, but the eyelets don't mount. Okay, so before we get into how to operate these, I just want to show you a couple of things. So with the clamps, I just want to show you how elegant and simple the clamps are. If you want to put the clamp on the light, you just put the clamp over the top and push down, okay? And now that's mounted in, and that is not going to shake loose, okay? And to remove it, all you do is pull on it. Now, the last thing I just want to point out is, before I forget, is just a warning to people with this kit. The lid with the tubes in it is very, very heavy. Okay, so it's borderline top heavy. So if you started unpacking things out of this, taking clamps out, taking the tubes out the bottom, and you lift these 4 tubes in the top, you could flip the kit over. Now, to give you some idea of just how heavy I'm talking about, how top heavy it is, I've got this on a fold-up trestle table, and I've got 2 shot bags holding the table in place, and I've got a C-stand here behind with a shot bag on it to stop this from flipping off the table. So that's something you need to be aware of and something to be cautious with. Okay, so sometimes with lights you pay a lot of money and you're just paying for a brand name, but with these guys you actually are paying for things that you might not necessarily see straight away. So one of the things that you're paying for is the battery management system. If the batteries in the unit are too cold or too hot for optimal charging, the units will not charge. You can get a message on the display saying that the battery is too hot to charge, or vice versa, too cold to charge. When the temperature drops to an optimum charging temperature or goes up to an optimal charging temperature, then the battery will charge. So every effort is made to ensure that you are not damaging your battery prematurely. Furthermore, if you're running the lights off external power, the power doesn't get to the LEDs via the battery, which is the case with a lot of LED systems that are out there. It has a battery bypass, so you are not straining the battery running the unit off mains power. Furthermore, this battery management extends across to the phone app. You get real-time information as to what percentage of battery is remaining. You get information as to whether the battery is on charge. And in addition to that, you'll even get told if a tube has been turned off. And on the app, the battery information is available for the Astera Box as well. There is one thing you've got to watch out for though with this unit. If you are running the lights at maximum output, you can't get enough power through this inlet to run the light and simultaneously charge the battery. Now, I've only had these units on set a handful of times, and this has never been an issue because if you're pointing the light directly at the camera at full power, it's going to be far too bright. Now, the next thing I want to mention is the extended CCT range in these. So these go right down into the ambers. Now, there are quite a few LED lights on the market now that can go down as low as 2000 Kelvin, but this is the standout unit as far as I'm concerned. So just to illustrate, this is the TN30 graphic off another very expensive light that can go down to 2000 Kelvin. And as you can see, the color render is a little bit out of shape. Now, here's the TN30 color graph for a Titan tube at 2000 Kelvin. Have a look at that. It's got a TN30 score of 94. It's very, very accurate color render. With other lights that can go down to the ambers, you're getting an amber wash pretty much. You know, there's some color render in there, but it's not as good as this. So if I was doing a shoot where we needed an amber light as the key, I would very much consider lighting it with the Titan tubes here, because not only are you going to get that low CCT, that amber color, but you're going to get superb color render. So you're going to be able to see the amount of effort that the makeup artist went to. You're going to see the amount of effort that the wardrobe department went to, because all of those colors are going to be there. All right, so let's go through operating this thing off the back. And what we're going to do to start off with is just operate this like it's a basic LED tube. So what I mean by that is it's the same color all the way across. Okay, there's no pixel effects going on. Okay, so I've got great news. It's really, really simple to operate. So if you're going to operate it in this mode, you would feel pretty confident as a gaffer that you know how to operate it within about 1 minute of picking the tube up. And the best news is there's only 2 buttons you really need to know about. So let's take a look. Okay, so the 2 buttons you really need to know about are these 2. So one of these, this button does your brightness, and the other one changes your settings. Okay, so let's have a look at brightness first and explain a few things. Now with the menu system here, okay, plus or minus changes what you've got selected, and to change your selection you hit enter and it scrolls through. So the first one is brightness, it dims in 1% increments, so that's pretty straightforward. Now the next thing down is runtime, so let's select that. Now you can select the runtime of your battery. Okay, so I'm just going to explain that. So I've just set it for 5 hours. So what that means is the light will not exceed a brightness that will flatten the battery before 5 hours is up. Okay, so if I've got a shoot that runs for 4 hours and I want to give myself a bit of leeway for setting up and things like that, say an hour's leeway, I set the unit for 5 hours and it won't go flat before 5 hours. Okay, so it's the battery management. So that's pretty clever. Now you can select it all the way down to 20 hours. At 20 hours, it's pretty dim. Now I want to see what's going on the white board here and overpower the lights in the room. So I'm going to set it back to maximum brightness. Okay, now the next button in terms of operating this as a standard light you need to worry about is the settings button. And there you go, you've got a menu system that looks very familiar. CCT, that's your Kelvin. So just up and down to adjust that. Now your increments of adjustment on your CCT vary depending on where you are in the CCT range. So if you're below 6,000 Kelvin, so that's 1,750 Kelvin all the way up to 6,000 Kelvin, you can adjust in 50 Kelvin increments. Now from 6,000 Kelvin to 10,000 Kelvin, you can only adjust in 250 Kelvin increments. And from 10,000 Kelvin to 20,000 Kelvin, you can adjust in 1,000 Kelvin increments. Okay, next thing down on your menu is your plus minus green. And that is a full 1% adjustment all the way up to 100 plus and 100 minus green adjustment. So pretty straightforward there, very good. Okay, next thing down on the menu to have a look at is our hue, so that we can select, oops, wrong button. We can select our color, but first off, I'll just go to saturation. Done it again, press enter to go to saturation. So let's turn our saturation up full blast. Okay, there we go, and let's go back to hue, so I have to scroll through. And hue is our full 360 colors that we have in the HSI wheel. So there you go, you've got CCT adjustment, you can adjust your plus minus green, you can then add a hue, okay, all through simple operation on the back. Okay, so for me as a gaffer, that's a big sigh of relief that I can operate the basic functions in a light, touch on my fingertips, no brain required. That is a huge plus for me. Okay, so let's get a little bit more advanced, okay? Not much more difficult, let's just get a little bit more advanced and see what else we can do with basic operation. Okay, so if you press your setting button again, you now get a static color menu. So this is like your quick presets. Okay, so let's have a scroll through this. Okay, so 3200, 4000 and so on. Some basic preset colors. Okay, now if we press our settings button again, we are now in the gels mode. Okay, so let's go up to our gel selections. So we can select Lee with a daylight base or Lee with a tungsten base. We can select a Roscoe's gel menu with a tungsten base or Roscoe gel menu with a daylight base. So if I press enter, that scrolls down to the gel number and we can now scroll through and have a look at our gels. Now you can operate your special effects through what's called the standalone mode. We'll have a look at that in a minute, but first off, let's do a quick tour of the menu system. Okay, so let's have a look through the menu system. Okay, so you've got your input select. Okay, so you can select auto. Now with auto, it'll lock onto the first thing that it finds. So if you're using CRMX and you've got that turned on before you turn the tube on, it'll automatically lock to it. If you've got your phone app set up, it'll automatically lock to that. So the workflow on this unit is amazingly simple. Okay, so we've got auto, standalone mode, which we'll cover in a sec, that's your special effects, app control, wired DMX, which goes through the power inlet. What's next up? ArtNet 3, which goes through the power inlet. Your CRMX, your wireless DMX, and back to auto. Okay, let's keep scrolling through the menu system. Next option is static color, we've covered that. DMX address, that's pretty straightforward. DMX settings. Okay, so in DMX settings, you can set how many pixels this thing's running. So you can have it set to 1 pixel, and the whole lot's running as one light. You can select 2, I think it goes up in increments after that. You can select up to 16 pixels, which of course will use a lot of DMX addresses. So if you're going to be wanting to do pixel chases, things like that, you are better off going through the phone app than trying to program all this through DMX. At least that's my opinion. If you're a board operator and you're highly skilled, you probably disagree with me. All right, so let's have a look at the next thing in the menu system. So let's keep going. Unpair CRMX, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, runtime, we've covered that. Standalone, we're about to get into. AC failure. Okay, so if you're running this off AC power, say you're doing an event or whatever, you can program this unit to respond to lack of AC. So for example, if you had a power blackout, these could stay on as your emergency work lights. So that's pretty clever. Next up is info. That's things like your firmware information. And last is reset settings. Okay, now let's talk about running this in standalone mode. And standalone mode is easily the most difficult part of operating this tube. Standalone mode is where you can operate your effects through the controls on the back. Now, the only reason I think you'd ever want to do this is if you hired a tube and you were told there were no effects, and then they spring an effect on you and you've got no other way of running it. I can't think of any better way they could have programmed the menu, but I would advise against operating it this way. You'd be much better off with the phone app. Okay, so your first option in the standalone mode is program. So program is the special effect that you're dialing in. We'll get back to this in a sec. Your next option is intensity, which is your brightness, and you can adjust your intensity in 10% increments only. And the next option is speed. Now speed has this weird sort of timing thing. I couldn't figure that out. I just basically press the buttons until it goes faster or slower at the speed I want. I couldn't quite figure out how that system worked. Next is fade. You've got color 1, color 2, color 3, and color 4. So you can program in 4 colors on the effects that can run up to 4 colors. Now let's have a quick look through the color menu. All right, so you've got a whole stack of easy presets. So we've got yellow, green, cyan, blue, violet, pink, black. Now black sounds like a weird one, but if you've got like a process going through, you want black as the background color if you just want to get like a street light effect. Okay. Next are your Kelvin presets. You've got index color and custom color. Custom color is like an RGB sort of matrix sort of mix. I don't really want to get into playing with that. Okay, so let's have a look now through the programs. I'll just turn the key light off so you can see what's going on. Okay, so I select my programs. We've got 1 color static, 2 color static, 3 color static, and bear in mind you can change all the parameters. 4 color static, 1 color fade, 2 color fade, 3 color fade, 4 color fade, simple running, so I'm guessing that's a process, double running, two color running, flag running, so I think that's multiple colors running in a process, double flag running, spiral 4 colors, spiral 2 colors, rainbow, fire. Now the fire might not look all that good because I've played around in the color menu. Rotor, rotor split 2, rotor split 4, layer effect, and we're back to 1 color static. So it is missing some of the cliche effects like cop car and paparazzi, but they are in the mobile phone app. Okay, so let's talk about running the system off a mobile device, and you can run iOS, Android, or even an iPad. Now, in order to do that, you're going to need one of these Astera boxes, and this sells for about $400 US. So some of you are probably thinking, well, that's a bit rich. You've got light systems out there where you can run them off a phone app and you don't need any connection device in between. Your phone app can connect straight to that light or even to multiple lights. Here's the difference. This system is incredibly fast, incredibly reactive. So with the day or so that I've been testing the tubes, not one tube has missed a command. Not one tube has been late on a command. If you've got all the tubes working together, they are perfectly in sync. Unbelievably accurate. Now, let's talk about the difference between this and other link boxes that other tube systems have. This is not a Wi-Fi router disguised as something better. This is a legit transmitter. So the first difference is this is a Bluetooth connection to your mobile device. So that enables your mobile device to still use its Wi-Fi for data. So you can use that Wi-Fi data and this device to update your tubes, to firmware update your tubes. So you can do that over your home internet connection via your mobile device and this. And it is really simple. It updates all of the tubes. You can do it all at the same time. You can do it in the background. Piece of cake. You can also update the firmware on this. The next difference is this has two transmitters in it. So you've got one transmitter sending out your data from your mobile phone app going to the tubes, and the other antenna is transmitting your Lumen radio. So what that means is via this adapter here, you can plug in 5-pin DMX and run 5-pin DMX wirelessly to your tubes. Now the next point of difference is this has a built-in battery. So you can put this on your waist, run your mobile device, walk around set, no problem at all. The other big difference is this is two-way communication with the tubes. Okay, so you get real-time information as to things like your battery status, the temperature of the tubes. You can do things like change the DMX settings in the tubes. So if your eyes are getting a bit old and you can't read the small screen, you can get out an iPad and use that to change your DMX settings. You can do things like change the battery runtime on the whole set. So it's a very, very simple system to use. But there is one thing I want to point out. If you unpack this box and you pull out the instruction manual leads you to an out-of-date version of the phone app. So you want to make sure you've downloaded Astera app, not Astera app Classic. So if you don't know which one you've got, here's a simple way to tell. If your app doesn't have the ability to dial in a CCT, to dial in a plus-minus screen, you can't dial in a HSI, and you don't have a GELS library, you've got the out-of-date phone app, so that's very important. Now, in the past, I've looked at some of the training videos that are online for the phone app, and I actually found them quite intimidating because I'm dyslexic, I don't learn things easily. So I thought for this video, I would give myself a challenge. Having never used the phone app before, having no idea of how to run it, I thought I'd give myself a deadline of an hour and a half to figure out what I could do. And here's what I was able to achieve in an hour and a half. Here's a quick edit. Before shooting and editing that little compile together, I had never used the software. So I think that says a lot for how intuitive it is to use. Now, I have to say I'm not an expert at it. At an hour and a half, I couldn't even figure out how to save things. So I was literally making it up as I was going along. But I'll just run you through how simple the app was to use to do some of that effects. So the first thing you have to do is link to the Astera Box. So I do that by pressing the menu in the top right-hand corner and tapping on pair to box. So I don't have to go into the Bluetooth connection part of my mobile phone. It's all done here. So there it is. It's trying to connect to the box. I think I've got to press it twice by memory. Okay, and when I get to this point, I click on tap to pair, and then I enter in the device serial number, which is actually on the back on a sticker. And I click pair lights, and it gives me the following instructions: to hold down the power button until the light flashes blue. So I do that on all the lights. Now you only have to do this once. You don't have to do it every single time you turn on your phone app. It's only the first time that you pair the lights to your phone. After that, you don't need to do it again. Okay, and click OK. Now you'll know when it's paired to a light because the light will stop flashing blue. Now this usually does at first go. I've had one time where I had to do it twice to get one of the tubes to link, but usually it does at first go. Okay, now I exit that part of the menu, and this target symbol that's all of our groups. Now we don't have any groups assigned, we've only got all lights. So if you're under the pump and you want to get an effect in the background, you can actually start now. So we'll click on the effects menu, which is the 4 squares next to it. And if you scroll left to right, you get a huge list of effects. All right, so let's click fire and see what happens. Okay, so as you can see straight away, next to no effort with the app, you can start running background effects. Okay, so let's have a look at rainbow. All right, so let's have a quick look through. Let's go that effect. Right, now you can adjust your effects. So you click on the menu, on the settings in the top of the menu there. And you can adjust things like your speed. All right, so bear in mind, we've only just fired this app up, next to no experience, no idea what you're doing. You can start getting some funky effects up straight away. Now you can change the colors, so let's have a look here, C1, that's color 1, so let's press on that. Okay, and we can dial in a new color if we want. Okay, then press, well, I've got the same color twice there, then press C1 again, and we're out. So we can do a lot of adjustment. So let's go back to our effects. Let's have a play around a bit more. Let's go to rainbow. Now, let's forget about effects for a second. Let's say you want to use this as your day-to-day phone app and you just want to have the light running as a white light, like a standard film industry light. So what you do is you click where it says just red, or that solid color there. Okay, so click on that and then click the settings. Now C1, color 1, so click on that to change that color. Now you've got your color wheel here, but we can ignore the color wheel. Let's go up to HSI and click on that. And now we can set the light from 2000 Kelvin, or set the lights from 2000 Kelvin up to 10,000 Kelvin with plus minus green. And we can also do hue, saturation and intensity. So let's dial in some color saturation, and we've got our 360 colors. That we can pick. Now it's worth pointing out here that we can desaturate that to any Kelvin between 2000 Kelvin and 10,000 Kelvin. So we do have traditional control over the lights that we're used to having in film and television. Now I'm just going to jump in here at this point because there's something I forgot to mention. So next to HSI you can see 1, 2, 3. Now if you click on that, that is your Lee and Roscoe's gels library. So if you click on where it says Lee Daylight, you can choose Lee Daylight, Lee Tungsten, Lee Roscoe, Lee Tungsten. So we'll go with Lee Daylight there and have a scroll through. You can see there's a massive gels library. Okay, now let's say we don't want to operate all these lights. Let's say we just want to operate one of the lights. Okay, so first thing I'll do is I'll dim all the lights down. Okay. Now let's go to our target lights, and now we're going to hit the plus symbol here to add a light or add a group. Okay. Now we're going to add an individual light. So we're going to click down there. Now up comes our list of lights that we're controlling. Let's say we want to operate the center light. What we do to find that is we press the light globe icons. So that's not the light I want. That's the light I want. Then I click on the light and hit OK. All right, so now I've got a group assigned with that light, so I just click on that, and now I can operate that light. I've got complete control over that one fixture. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So let's go back to that group. Let's get rid of that. So I'll get rid of that one light from operation. I'll click on the pencil by memory and remove tile. Okay, now let's go back to all lights. Let's get them all doing the same thing. Let's get them all back to red. Okay, and let's fade them to black, just so I've got a start point. Okay, now let's start grouping the lights. Okay, so we've got a choice of groups we can set up. So I'll just go, I've gone to our groups, I've gone plus to set up a group. We can set up sync effects or sync sets. Now sync sets, all of the tubes do the same thing, or we can set up a flow set where the effect goes from one tube to the other. So let's set up a sync set first. So I'll click on that, and then I click on the lights I want to add. Now again, I flick the light button to see which light it is. Okay, so here's a little thing I do. I like to set up odds and evens. Okay, so let's see if we can find the first light. So I'll have that one. Let's go, not that one. Okay, I want that one as well. I don't want that one. Don't want that one. I want that one. Don't want that one. Where is it? There it is. Bang. So they're the ones I'm going to put in my group. Okay, and they're all in a group. Let's call that odds. So this is a little trick I do when I'm working with, spell that correctly. It's a little trick I do when I'm working with groups. I like to do odds and evens. It helps me set things up fast. Okay, tick OK. Okay, so now I've got all of my odd lights, which I can operate by themselves. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so what I can do, for example, just to show you very quickly, is I can deselect that, select all lights, and say have a rainbow effect running on all the lights. And then I can select my odd lights and maybe put the rainbow effect, I'll put the fire effect just through my odd lights. So I've got a little bit of control like that. Now I'm going to set up a second group of evens. So this is where this app's pretty clever. So let's go set up a new group. Actually, I'll just go all lights first and turn the brightness off on all those. That just makes it easier for me to work. Okay, let's set up a new group and we'll go evens. So I'll go sync set again. Now here's the interesting thing. All the ones that are already assigned to a group have odds written next to them. So I know that that one, that one, that one are my even ones. So I just select all three of those. Okay. And I'll call that my evens. So let's go back. So I've got my odd group. Let's put those just to red. And I've got my evens group. Let's put some funky thing through that. Let's go that. Whoops, I messed up. I forgot to deselect my odds. So let's deselect my evens. Let's change my odds to something else. Let's change my odds to the rainbow effect. Okay, now here's the fun thing. Here's where this is good. I can select both of those groups simultaneously, which I did before by accident. And I can have all the tubes doing the same thing. Now here's the thing, in sync, they run in sync. So see the effect is the same. So the same timing on all the tubes. So I can go where's something interesting? I can go a pulse effect and see that times through. I'll go through the settings. I can adjust the speed on that. Let's put the background to black. Now you see all of the tubes work together in sync. All right, so now let's have a go at setting up a flow set. So that's a little bit more complicated. So a flow set allows the effect to go from one tube to the next. So we'll click on the flow set. Okay, now you set the number of tubes you want in. Now this is where I kept messing up, and I think it's because I'm a bit dyslexic. Don't type in the number of tubes you want because it automatically has 2 tubes in the flow set when you set it up. So you want to type the additional number of tubes you want. So we've got 7 tubes I want to put in. So I want, there's already 2 tubes, so I want to add an additional 5 tubes to the setup. So that's a little bit confusing. So as you can see here, it says, okay, 7 positions of 7. All right, so let's go back to position 1. Okay, so that's the first tube out of the 7 tubes, and let's assign a light to that. Okay, so I click on the light button there. Previously I assigned things to odds and evens, so you can see those down, so that's helping me find it. So let's take a guess at the first odd. Okay, there it is, beautiful. So I'm going to assign that as tube number 1. Okay, let's go to our next tube, position 2, and find position 2. So that's going to be an even. Maybe it's that one. No. Is it this one? No. There we go. So that's tube number 2. Yes. Okay, let's assign light to tube position number 3. So that's going to be an odd. So is it that one? Yep, good guess. Yep. Okay, let's go to the next light, number 4. Assign that, so that's an even. So is it that one? No. There we go. Click on that. Assign that. Yes. Okay, light number 5, that's an odd number. Okay. Oh, that's not it. There we go. Light number 5. Okay. Yes. All right, let's go light number 6. That's an even. So it's got to be that one. Okay, yes, and you do have to assign light number 7. There's only one light left. There we go. Bang. So they've now been assigned into the flow group by their numbers. Now you can set the numbers in any order you want, but I decided to set them linear. Okay, so let's go back now. Okay, so you can see there I've got a flow group. So I just want to show you something. So I'm going to select sync groups first, and we'll run a, there we go, we'll run this pattern through. Okay, let's speed that up because that's looking a bit boring. Okay, so as you can see there, the lights are running in sync. They're all doing the same thing. Okay, now we're going to run the same pattern through our flow group. Okay. Let's speed it up a little bit, make it a bit more interesting. So you can see the effects flow from one tube to the next. So that's where it can be a lot of fun, having a play to see what the difference is between flow and sync. So I'll just show you a few other effects, the differences. So let's go back to having sync sets, and we'll put the rainbow through. And you can see all the tubes there are doing the same rainbow effect. Now if we do rainbow effect in the flow group, so I just select our groups, select flow, select our rainbow, you can see the effect goes from one tube across to the next. So let's speed that up so you can see what's happening. Okay, so our rainbow effect goes from one tube to the next. It's not just on the individual tubes. So there's a lot of creativity with the app, and I've literally learnt this in an hour and a half, how to operate the app. And I wouldn't call myself an expert in operating this app. I think there's a lot I could still learn, but it's definitely an interesting app to play with. It's a lot of fun. Now you've got cool things like gradient. Okay, so you can have a color grading from the top to the bottom of the tubes, but you can also do that in sync mode. So let's just switch that across to to flow mode. That goes across the tubes from one side of the set to the other. Now all of these effects, they're graduated across all of the tubes that you have. So at the moment we've only got 7 tubes, but if we had 20, it would be graduated across the 20 tubes. So that gives you an idea of how easy the app is to use, and I've got to admit, if you know what you're doing with the app, I probably look like a complete hack. There is something I forgot to mention in that video. In the top right hand corner, if you press up there, the picture of the sun, that's all your master sliders, so you can control your brightness levels on your sets and on your masters. Now I haven't even got into things like, where did I find it? Adding a program, creating a scene, adding a function. I didn't get into any of that stuff. Maybe I'll do that another day. But if you really want to get your head around it, go to the Astera website. You'll see in the menu up the top, Astera Academy. They've got loads of videos that'll turn you from a hack like me into a Jedi Knight with these things. Okay, now let's have a look at the business end of things. Let's have a look at this thing running off DMX, and I'm going to start with it wired. Okay, so we've got a wired connection going out of my Exolux controller into the Titan power box, and then we're feeding the DMX signal into the tube via a power cable. Now, I don't want to fire up all the tubes because I've got to reconnect them all, turn them around. I don't have any cables. 2 hard baskets, so we're only doing 1 tube. Okay, so let's go to black. And first off, let's have a look at how quickly this thing responds to on-off commands. So 3, 2, 1, bang. 3, 2, 1, off. Okay, that's pretty responsive. Let's have a look at how it goes with a 5-second dim command. That is very, very smooth. Okay, let's dim to black. Extremely smooth. I'm quite impressed for a shared cable. Let's go to 2.5 seconds, roughly 2.5 seconds, and bang. Very smooth. Love it. Awesome. Very, very, very smooth. Okay, now I've seen on a lot of forums, people have said that over the Titan box here going through the shared power cables, the DMX is really, really bad. It's really jerky. And other people have said, what are you on about? It's really, really smooth. I think I've figured out what it is. So this is hardwired. So let's disconnect the hard wire and let's feed in a lumen radio transmitter. Lumen radio receiver. Let's feed that in. Now here's where what I think the problem is. Over the cable, you get a higher frequency DMX signal going in, but over lumen radio, you're at the refresh rate of the transmitter, which I think on mine's something like 45 hertz. Not 100% certain, but it's nowhere near as high as a cable. And I think that is what causes the problem. So now we're going to have a look at lumen radio fed into the box, getting fed to the tube over the power cable. So what we'll do here, just to make my point very, very quickly, is we'll do a 5-second fade up from black. And a 5-second fade down from black. So as you can see, if you feed a lumen radio into the box, it doesn't work too well, but if you feed a hard wire in, it works fine. Maybe that'll get fixed with an update, who knows. Okay, let's see how these things go over CRMX, lumen radio. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's have a look at their instant command. Okay, 3, 2, 1, bang. Have a look at that. They are all perfectly in sync with each other. That's amazing. And that's why you pay the big bucks. Okay, so let's do a 5-second fade to black, see how it copes with that. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, let's do a fade up. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, that's pretty cool. Let's throw some random colors in. Let's have a look at some gels maybe. Okay. All right, so that's why you pay the big bucks. Now there is another way of operating these lights, and that is infrared remote control. So as you can see here, I've got the lights in fire mode, and with a click of an infrared remote control, I can change the mode. So if you're thinking that's fantastic, well, here's where this is going to be an absolute pain in the ass. This remote control is actually for my air conditioning unit. So if you're on set and your lights start changing, you know someone's using a remote. All right, so before we get into the technical part and talk about the numbers, just a few things to explain. So this is the Titan tube. They also have a Helios, which is half the size. And they've got a Hyperon, which is double the size. Now there's another tube that everyone seems to have forgotten about in film and television, and that's called the AX1, which is, I suppose, the poor man's version of these. They're not as bright and they don't have the same color render. They're only RGBW, but they can do some pretty good effects in the background. So why am I pointing this out? Well, if you can't afford to have hundreds of these, the AX1s might be a good option. And these tubes happen to have an AX1 compatibility mode. So if you put these into AX1 compatibility mode, you can put them right next to the AX1s and they will blend in your backgrounds. All right, so let's get into the technical side of the review now and go over all the stats I've collected. All right, so the first thing I'd like to point out is these lights look way more colorful, way more vibrant than any other tube I've ever seen or any other light I've ever used on a film set. And there are two reasons why. Number one is they're not RGB. We've already covered that in the video, so I'm not going to go on about it. Second reason is the colors are really highly saturated. So they're so highly saturated, in fact, that if you go into the phone app and you dim the saturation down to 50% saturation, they still read as 100% saturated on a color meter if you're testing them against a D65 or D55 HSI standard. So that's something worth pointing out, because if you want to match a desaturated color to something like a sky panel, you're going to have to go a long way down on the saturation levels on these to get a match. Okay, now let's talk about the positive data, which is literally everything else, starting off with the battery life. I was really surprised when I ran these things at 3200 Kelvin and 5600 Kelvin at maximum brightness settings, minimum battery life. I got a staggering 2 hours and 10 minutes runtime. Now, with all the days of testing I did on this, I completely forgot to take measurements of the brightness. So here are all the brightness scores measured at 1 meter at different battery settings. Okay, let's get into CCT accuracies, and this is staggering. Okay, between 1750 Kelvin and 2000 Kelvin, these units are typically out by minus 27 Kelvin. Now this bit is staggering. Between 2000 Kelvin and 4000 Kelvin, these lights are typically accurate to plus or minus 8 Kelvin. Now I just want to point something out here. These lights could actually be more accurate than that, because that is within the tolerance range of my spectrometer. Between 4000 to 5000 Kelvin, they're typically accurate to plus or minus 10 Kelvin, and between 5000 Kelvin and 6000 Kelvin, they were typically accurate to 13.5 Kelvin. Now the one thing I want to point out here with how amazing that is between 2000 Kelvin and 6000 Kelvin, if you dial in a CCT on this light and you take a spectrometer reading, if you round that spectrometer reading up or down to the nearest 50 Kelvin, you get the target value that was dialed in on the lights. Okay, now let's talk about delta UV, which is the white point accuracy. In other words, is the light green, pink, or neutral? All right, so between 1750 and 2000 Kelvin, the most it was out by was minus 12 increments, which would be roughly the equivalent of a 16th correction gel, if a 16th correction gel existed. Between 2000 and 3000 Kelvin, it was typically out by plus or minus 3 increments. Between 3000 and 4000 Kelvin, it was typically out by 4 increments, which would be 1/6 of a 1/8 correction gel. Between 4000 and 5000 Kelvin, it was typically out by plus 7 increments. And between 5000 to 6000 Kelvin, it was typically out by plus 0.0012 delta UV, which would be roughly the equivalent of a 1/16th correction gel. Now let's get into color render results, starting off with SSI. Tested at 3200 Kelvin against the 3200 Kelvin SSI standard, these units came in with a high score of 84. Tested at 5500 Kelvin against the SSI 5500 Kelvin standard, these units came in with a score of 70. All right, let's talk about TM30 color vector testing. Now to give you some idea of scale, anything above 90 is really good, and there are currently only a handful of film and television LED lights that can hit 96. Okay, so between 1750 and 2000 Kelvin, the lowest score was 91 and the highest score was 94, with an average of 93. Between 2000 Kelvin and 3000 Kelvin, the average score was 93.8. Between 3004 Kelvin, the average score was 93.7. Between 4000 and 5000 Kelvin, the average score was 93.2. And between 5000 and 6000 Kelvin, the average score was 92.6. Now, just something I want to point out here is the color vector stays in shape. It stays pretty much as a circle until you get to about 10,000 Kelvin, where the unit score then drops to about 89. All right, so let's take a closer look at our more commonly used Kelvins, starting with 3200 Kelvin. When I dialed in 3200 Kelvin, I got 3200 Kelvin on the money. TM30 color vector suggests a color render score of 94% with 101% saturation. Here is the wavelength analysis, and it does look different to what you're normally used to seeing because there's no white emitter. And the delta UV score was surprisingly close to pure white at 0.0002 delta UV. When I dialed in 4400 Kelvin, I got 4417 Kelvin. TN30 colour vector testing indicates a colour render score of 93% with 100% saturation. Here is the wavelength analysis. And the white point is very, very close. It's out by 0.0007 delta UV, which means the light is ever so slightly green by about 1/3 of a 1/8 correction gel. When I dialed in 5600 Kelvin, I got 5586 Kelvin. On TN30 colour vector testing, we got a 93% colour render with an average 101% saturation. Here is the wavelength analysis. And the white point is off the Planckian curve by 0.0011 delta UV, which in old school terms would make it slightly green by about a 1/16 correction gel. Okay, let's take a look at how these units dial in a primary colour vector. Red, which should be 0 degrees, came in smack on at 0 degrees. Green, which should be 120 degrees, came in smack on at 120 degrees. Blue, which should be 240 degrees, was very close at 241 degrees. And the final part of the technical review, let's see how these things dial in a secondary colour vector. Yellow, which should be 60 degrees, came in at 47 degrees. Cyan, which should be 180 degrees, came in at 165 degrees. And magenta, which should be 300 degrees, came in very close at 306 degrees. Well, I'm glad this review is finally over. It's taken me forever to do it because of the amount of testing involved and the amount I've had to learn. When I started doing this review, I thought these were overpriced effects lights. Now I'm their biggest fan. The only criticism I've got is I can't really afford to buy any of them yet. I'm Andrew Locke. See you on the next episode of Gaffering Gear.